Thanks for joining me here for the first day. So what I usually like to do on the first day is just a quick overview of the TOEFL. Now, again, I'm going to be talking about the TOEFL mostly today. Really, the other two workshops are going to be focusing more on writing. But I know that some of you have expressed interest in the TOEFL, so I do want to talk. I do want to talk about that. Um, you will be, the requirements of the essay, and so you will be able to use these skills for other things as well. But again, we're going to talk mostly about the TOEFL here in this first day, and hopefully you had a chance to watch the video that I sent a couple of days ago. So let's go ahead and kind of give a quick overview of the independent writing task. So the TOEFL has two writing sections, but we're going to be speaking mostly of the independent section when it comes to writing an essay. So what we're going to be doing here very quickly is looking at the three types of TOEFL essays. So again, there's the comparison essay, the defense essay, explanatory essay, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then we'll get into a little more detail about the introduction. Now, really, the introduction is again, not the most important part of writing the TOEFL essay, but certainly it does accomplish two very important things, which, again, we'll talk about here. But we will be talking about some writing ideas, especially when it comes to how to write a hook and how to write a thesis. Okay. Now, some of you said you didn't get the sign-in form, so I did send it. I did send it to both of you, so you might want to wait a moment and check. And so Janelle and Frank so I did send it to you, so you might just want to check back in your email in just a moment. Okay, so first off, I'm just going to talk about the TOEFL in general when it comes to this part of the test, and that is that basically on the test, you have 30 minutes to prepare, write, and revise a written response. And there's only one independent writing test, so there's only one essay that you have to write. Now, what I'd like to do is take just a minute or so and talk about the three different kinds of essays that you see on the test. Now, first off, I'm real curious here. You can answer in the chat box if you like, but how many of you are actually interested in taking the TOEFL? So if you want to answer me in the chat box, just really quickly, how many of you are actually thinking about taking the real TOEFL test? So if you want to answer that in the chat box as I'm kind of going along. But the basic idea here is I'm going to be talking a little bit about the TOEFL, but I'm also going to be including lots of TOEFL information in our Google Classroom. So in case you really are interested, I will post more writing topics because, again, we won't have time to talk about all of the topics here in this presentation. Now, in general, the TOEFL itself, there are three different kind of essays. So really, we're going to be looking at what's called the explanatory, the defense, and the comparison. And what I'm going to do is just very quickly look at three different essay types and try to identify what language they use. So that way you can kind of see how they structure these particular topics. Okay. So for example, let's look at the first one we're going to talk about is the explanatory essay. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just read the sample topic. This is an actual TOEFL topic. This is one that they gave us in advance. So it says, your school has received a gift of money. What do you think is the best way for your school to spend this money? Use specific reasons and details to support your choice. Now, first off, the most important thing on the TOEFL, when you see the topic for the first time, is to be able to identify, well, what kind of response do I need to give? So, for example, how do we know this is an explanatory essay? Well, if you notice, this particular topic asks your opinion. It says, what do you think about something? So, for example, explanatory essays generally just want to know your opinion on some particular topic. And if you'll notice, many of the topics will involve school, university, university life, and maybe some of you have already had the chance to study at a university, at some point in your life. So, but the idea here is usually the explanatory essays are just your opinion on some particular thing. And sometimes the topics are, just this, kind of simple. So maybe again, thinking about what you would spend money on for your school, again, maybe you would say a library, for example, or maybe scholarships to pay for students. Maybe more money for your English teacher, right? Well, anyway, that's just one suggestion. Okay. All right. Now, the most popular essay topic is what's called the defense essay. And the defense essay is basically where you have to defend one particular point of view. So, for example, here it says, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? People should sometimes do things that they don't enjoy doing. Use specific reasons and examples to support your answer. Okay, so for example, in this case, this is a defense essay because it asks me to choose which particular point of view I support. So often the defense essays will have an agree or disagree in the particular topic. So in this case, you would have to decide, do I agree with this statement or I don't agree? Now, we'll talk a little bit more about how to respond to an essay in just a few minutes. But again, in identifying the essay topic, this means I have to choose which particular point of view. Do I agree with this statement or not? Okay. All right. And then finally, we have the comparison essay. And the comparison essay is exactly what you think it is. You're comparing something. But sometimes they don't always use the word compare. Let's take a look. Some people believe that a college or university education should be available to all students. Others believe that higher education should be available only to good students. Discuss these views. Which view do you agree with? And explain why. Now, this one is a comparison essay. Even though it does not say compare, it does say discuss. And what it means is discuss both of these point of views. Yeah, don't defend one point of view or the other. You have to discuss both of them. And notice that on the TOEFL, they will always ask you, discuss these views, and then finally, which one do you support? Do you believe it should be only for all good students, or do you believe it should be available to everyone? So again, these are the three different kinds of essays that you're going to see on the TOEFL. Now, what I'm going to be doing, guys, for these three workshops is we're going to work on a topic. We, as a group, are going to work on a topic together. And this is the topic that if you are going to be practicing writing an essay, this is the topic you're going to be practicing with. Okay, so let me read it, and then we'll see if we can identify what kind of essay it is. So it says, some people choose friends who are different from themselves. Others choose friends who are similar to themselves. Compare the advantages of having friends who are different from you with the advantages of having friends who are similar to you. Which kind of friend do you prefer for yourself and why? Now, guys, what kind of essay do you think this is? And again, you could use your microphone or the chat box, but do you think this is an explanatory essay, a defense essay, or do you think it's a comparison essay? Who thinks they know?
Comparison.
All right, very good. It is a comparison essay. And if you notice in the essay itself, we see the word compare, right? So in this case, congratulations. So you got it right. Now the question is, what are we comparing? So guys, now tonight we're not going to talk as much about the actual topic. We're going to do more of that next week. So tonight we're just kind of giving an overview and talking a little bit about how to begin the essay. But I do want you to start thinking about an answer to this because obviously you're going to have to come up with an opinion. But notice in the actual topic, this particular comparison asks us to look at the advantages of having friends who are different with the advantages of having friends who are similar. Now, the basic idea here is we're looking at the good things about both of these. And that's kind of nice, right? We don't have to think so much about the negatives. We can think about the positives of both of these things. I'm sure everybody here in the group could agree that there are good things about both, right? And of course, there are negative things too. And then notice the final part of the essay does require you to talk about what kind of friend do you prefer. Now, we're going to talk more about how to answer that topic next week when we start talking about the body of the essay. But guys, I want you to go ahead and start thinking about this now. Think about what are the advantages of friends who are different from you and the advantages of friends who are similar to you. And then think about maybe, do you have a group that you prefer? Or maybe there's a way that you could say that you like both groups. So anyway, we'll talk more about that next week. Now, guys, every week I'm going to be sharing with you tricks that we often find on the TOEFL. Now, first off, again, I'm curious here. You can answer in the chat box if you like. Has anyone actually taken the TOEFL? So if anybody has taken the TOEFL, you can tell us in the chat box if you have. But I do want to say that I have taught the TOEFL for many, many, many years. In fact, I've taught it from its paper-based version to its computer-based version to now the internet-based version. And actually, the structure of the writing part of the test really has not changed. So one thing that is very consistent is that the TOEFL loves to trick you in certain ways. And for the writing topic, one of the ways they try to trick you is by using vague and extreme language. Now, vague, anybody know what vague means? What does it mean, vague? Any guesses?
No idea. I don't know.
Okay, so Eduardo says he doesn't know. Anybody have an idea? Well, my Spanish speakers, you probably could guess this word. It's very similar in Spanish, maybe in Portuguese too. Okay.
Vago.
Yeah.
Yes, it looks the same. It's like a lazy person.
Well, kind of.
No.
In this case, what it means is not clear. So when something is
Right. You're
vague,
right. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. Now Frank says Vogue, so no, this isn't a Madonna song. So in this case, vague just means it's not clear. And the TOEFL loves to use language that's not very clear or extreme. Now let me demonstrate, and then we're going to talk about our topic, okay? So again, the TOEFL uses vague and extreme language, and often this can make it a little difficult to understand what am I writing? What are the requirements of the essay? Now, I'm going to take a look at a couple of examples, and we're going to see where can we find some of that unclear language. Now, here's an example here. Let's look at it. So this one says, learning about the past has no value for those of us living in the present. Do you agree or disagree? Use specific reasons and examples to support your answer. Now, if you notice, this is a defense essay. It asks us to agree or disagree. But the problem is, well, what exactly am I agreeing to and what exactly am I disagreeing? So part of the problem is the way the essay prompt is written. So for example, if you look at the topic, we can kind of identify that, well, wait a minute, no value? Well, that seems kind of extreme, doesn't it? Learning about the past has no value, like it's a waste of time. So for example, this is the kind of thing that the TOEFL loves to trick you with. It loves to say, well, let's see if you can figure out what does that mean. So the question here is, it's asking us to choose a side. But the question is, what exactly are those sides? So if you notice, taking the topic here on the left side, let's think about, well, for example, what if I agree with this statement? If I agree that learning has no value, what does that really mean? Well, basically it means that you think the past is useless for us today. Like there's absolutely no point in studying the past. Now, class, do you agree with this? Do you really believe that the past has no value to us?
No.
We should study the past, right? You think so? Anybody here a history student? Nobody? Wait a minute, maybe you guys agree with this then. I don't know. Okay, Stephanie says she is. Okay. So obviously one of the problems is when they use this extreme language, it can make it kind of difficult. Well, what if I agree to this? What am I agreeing to? Well, notice if you disagree with the statement, that becomes a little more interesting because now if you disagree with the statement, it means you think the past has some value. Now see, notice what that means. It means I disagree with the extreme language in the topic. So what it means is I think the past has some value. Now, that does not necessarily mean that I think the past is better. So let's be clear. If I disagree with this statement, it doesn't mean I think the past is better than the present. It just means I disagree with this sentence. In other words, I think the past does have value. Now, the question is how much value? So that's what you have to think about when you're writing an essay. Now, in thinking about this kind of vague or extreme language, often what I tell students is when thinking about answering a topic on the TOEFL, my advice is to think about which particular point of view, which particular idea gives me the most to talk about. Now, again, we're not going to talk so much about the TOEFL requirements in this discussion, but I do want everybody to know that the TOEFL generally, a successful TOEFL essay, I'll put it up here on the screen. Most people think that a successful TOEFL essay generally should be around 300 words. Now, I hate to tell everybody, but in and at and to and for, those don't count, okay? And repeating very, 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 very 100 times, that doesn't count either. 300 words means 300 good words in writing an essay. Now, I don't know anybody here in the class in terms of their writing experience, but 300 words is about almost 2 pages of text, 2 pages that are double spaced. So that's a lot for many students at the beginning. And in fact, think about it in your own language. Can you write 300 words in your language in 30 minutes? That's not easy. So keep in mind, what I usually tell students is think about what gives you the most to talk about. So for example, in this situation, disagreeing with the statement would give you more opportunities. It's easier to say that you think we can learn from both the past and the present. That gives us more to talk about. So that's what I want you to think about too, is when you're looking at the essay topic, in this case, you need to think about which one gives you more to talk about. Now let's go back now to our essay, our topic. So in thinking about our topic, so where do you think we might have some extreme or vague language in our topic? Take a moment, guys. Look at the screen again. Do you see any words or ideas that might be not so clear or maybe a little extreme? What do you think? Again, you can use the mic or the chat box. What do you think? Any words that maybe not so clear? Any guesses? Anybody?
Hmm.
Yes, who people is choosing.
Okay, yeah. So for example, who are these people? Okay, that's a good start. We don't know exactly. So I think we can kind of guess that maybe they're talking about society, but yeah, that's a good start. Okay, what else? What else maybe aren't not very specific? Anybody else have an idea?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, guys, I'm giving you 3, 2, 1. All right. Well, for example, I'm going to circle 2 words here. And the question is, what exactly do they mean? Friends who are different from others and friends who are similar. Well, different how? Similar how? What do you think they could mean when they say friends who are different from you? Do you think they mean different physically or similar to you physically? What do you think?
Different character.
Okay, so maybe their character, maybe like for example, Kelly, like what would be an example of character, or Sonia, or anybody who has an idea?
And maybe things that they don't have in common,
Okay, so that's a good start.
like opinions about something, politics, whatever.
Okay, that's a good start. Okay, Freeine, what do you think? You have your hand up there.
Yes, I every time choose with different because it's advantage. When the other is stronger,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the
Oh,
stronger
okay.
enough.
Okay. So somebody who might know more than I do about something, somebody who might have more experience about something than I do. Is
Yes,
that what you mean? Okay, I think that's a good
but
thing.
is more easy than similar because the theme for talk on speech is
Hmm.
more easy
Well,
in
that's
this
true.
time.
Yeah, I mean, for example, it's easier to speak the same language, right? If we all have the same language. Now, guys, I think it's interesting. It's been fun watching a lot of you guys form friendships in our class, and I noticed that again, we don't all speak the same language. So I think one way we can think about too is maybe we're different cultural backgrounds, you know, not just similar cultural backgrounds. Well, again, I think you guys are now beginning to understand how the TOEFL tries to trick us. The question is, what do they mean by different and what do they mean by similar? So that's what I want you to think about. And this is our first kind of real discussion as to how we're going to answer this essay. So guys, again, you can think about that. Do you like people who have different, you know, political backgrounds, different social backgrounds, different characteristics, or do you seem to prefer those who are similar to yourself? And of course, keep in mind, we're looking at the advantages of both. Okay, remember that. So it's not just about just thinking about you know the good or the bad. We're actually looking at the advantages of both. So I'm sure right now many of you can start thinking about what the advantages are to having both particular groups. Okay. Well, so far, guys, now I think you're beginning to see how the TOEFL works. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next slide. All right, so guys, as I said before, in these next 3 weeks, we're going to be looking at the different parts of the essay. So today we're going to briefly talk about the introduction and what the introduction contains. And then really next week is the big week when it comes to writing the essay, because the body of the essay is probably the most important part, which again, we will be talking about next week. And then finally in the third week, we'll be discussing the conclusion. But today we're talking about the introduction. So let's talk about that. Now, once again, the introduction is the first paragraph. And think of the introduction as the way to introduce people to the universe, the ideas that you're going to be explaining in your essay. Now, guys, the two most important parts of the introduction are what we call the hook and the thesis. Now, again, maybe you guys have studied writing in your countries. Maybe you've taken writing classes, or maybe you'll see a lot of the same ideas. But I think students, in general, my experience is that students, if they have weaknesses, if they have areas that they're probably not as confident in, it's writing. And not only writing in English, but maybe even writing in their own language. And guess what? I think part of that is because, here in the United States, in school, in our high schools and so on, we focus a lot on writing, on the writing process. Now, maybe in your schools it was the same way, but in my experience, usually students, the areas they're not as confident in is in writing, and maybe not even in their language either. So again, this is probably going to be maybe a good chance for all of us to learn more about the writing process in general. Okay, now first off, guys, let's talk about what we mean when we say the hook. Okay, so down here we see the hook. See this guy catching the fish? So the hook is what we do to get people's interest. We try to catch their attention with a good, interesting idea right at the beginning. Now, there are many, many different ways to write a hook for the beginning of an essay. We're going to talk about two of them. One I like to call the personal view hook. So this is your opinion, your belief. So for example, this particular hook uses your own personal experience to frame the argument. Now, personal view hooks usually begin something like this. Right at the beginning of the essay, you might say, in my life or in my experience, or for example, maybe you refer to a specific time in your life. When I was in high school, or when I was in kindergarten, using some particular specific reference from your life. Or for example, I consider myself a friendly person. I consider myself smart, Starting with you as the personal point of view is a great way to get people interested in your essay. Another kind of hook is what we call the social view hook. Now, the social view hook is one that the TOEFL and lots of writers, lots of students who write for the TOEFL, they like to use. And the social view hook is where the hook tries to examine a general truth about the topic and thinking about how people in society see the situation. For example, friends are very important in people's lives. Every day we can see the value of friendship, okay? Or, for example, people often like to use like a popular expression, you know, like some of the expressions we've been learning in our classes, in our online chats. Well, here's a popular expression: a friend in need is a friend indeed. So someone who needs help. So notice what I said here is a friend in need is a friend indeed. This popular expression, dot, 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 dot. So in this case, all of these are ways that we can get our essay started and get the reader interested in what we're reading. Now, guys, remember, if you're writing for the TOEFL, the person who's reading your essay has probably read hundreds and hundreds of essays. And trust me, I would say probably out of the hundreds and hundreds of essays they read, probably only about 5 or 10% of them are any good. So first problem is if they're reading essays that people find boring, they're not going to look at your essay in a good way. So again, if you can get their attention, if you can hook them, so to speak, early, then they're going to be more interested in reading what you have to say. Now, again, I want you to think about in our essay. Now, you don't have to answer this now, okay? So I'm going to have a homework activity where you can practice with this. But I want you to think about for our essay, what would be an interesting hook? Again, I chose this topic because clearly we all know who friends are, and we all have had a chance to meet people, especially here in our program, people from different countries and so on. But I want you to think about which kind of hook would work with this essay. Thinking about maybe a personal experience. Maybe you can use friends from your life, maybe friends from our program. The fact that you have met different people from you and met people who are similar to you. Think about the social view hook. For the social view hook, think about, again, how important friendship is in general in society. Maybe you have an expression from your country that you could share. Now, of course, you would have to translate it into English. But the idea is you can connect to this essay topic either in a personal way, because again, we know who friends are, but that we can also think about maybe we could use a social hook to get people interested by thinking about society. So again, I'm giving you kind of some choices here. And of course, there are many more different kinds of hooks. But in my experience, these two different kinds of hooks are the ones that usually students find the most success with on the TOEFL. Okay, now I said before the TOEFL has two things in the introduction that are important. So the hook is very important, but then also the thesis. And maybe you know what the thesis is because that's a pretty common writing idea. It's not something we use just in English, right? But let's talk about what the thesis is. Now, first off, at the end of the introduction, usually the last sentence is what we call the thesis. And the thesis is a statement that clearly indicates what you're going to argue in the essay. Now, if you look over here on the right side, I've got a picture of a GPS with a map. I want you to think of the thesis as sort of like this GPS or this map, okay? Because the thesis is kind of the statement that's going to direct people through your essay. So really in thinking about writing your essay, a good thesis is going to tell readers what they're going to expect. So in this case, in thinking about our topic, what do we need to include in our thesis? So for example, in going back to the topic, remember, we have to include in our thesis the fact that we are going to compare the advantages of having friends with the advantages of having friends who are different and friends who are similar. But remember, the other part of the thesis is addressing this final question. Which kind of friend do you prefer for yourself? Now, remember, the thesis does not have to have all of the answers to these questions. The thesis is just telling the reader what you're going to do in the essay, okay? So, for example, we can introduce the thesis statement with things like this. In this essay, I will be comparing friends who are different to friends who are similar, and then giving my opinion as to which ones I prefer. That's a pretty general thesis. Maybe not super exciting, but at least it explains clearly what you're going to do in the essay. Another way to introduce it, I believe there are definite advantages to having friends who are different and to those who are similar to me. So again, in this case, I'm addressing the fact that I have to compare the advantages of both. Again, a substitute might be saying, in my opinion, I believe friends who are similar and those who are different have advantages, you know, something like that. So again, thesis statements are basically just that last 1 or 2 sentences that can help provide the reader with the direction where you're going to go. And that's the idea. You see, the TOEFL, they want to know, do you know what you're talking about? Okay? All right, now guys, our homework for next time. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to post a short activity. In fact, I'm going to leave the presentation here in just a moment and show you where you can find it. But what I want you to do is I want you to begin practicing writing a hook and writing a thesis for this topic. Okay. Now you'll see the topic in the actual activity, and I've also included a sample essay. Now the essay is not on this topic, but it will show you, for example, what it looks like, and I'm going to take you there and show you that right now. And then finally, in the Google Classroom, I have created a new TOEFL topic section. So when you go into the classwork section, you will see that all of the stuff I post for our TOEFL classes here, our TOEFL chats, will be located under that topic. So I'm gonna leave the presentation here, and I'm going to go into our classroom for just a moment. Let me save this. Okay. So when you go into Google Classroom, when you click on the Classwork tab, you will see that I have included a heading called TOEFL Essay Writing Workshop. Now, I will be posting this probably tomorrow, but again, what I have here are 2 documents, and then I'll also include the recording of this presentation. But if you click here on the TOEFL essay, so this is the first exercise I would like for you to try for next week, okay? Now guys, again, it's obviously going to be easier if you have a computer. Certainly it's going to be harder if you don't, because you're going to have to do some writing in this particular situation, okay? So keep in mind, keep in mind that you'll need to, you'll need to use a computer if you have one, okay? Now, what you're going to be doing in the first part of the activity, here's the topic for the essay, and then you're going to practice trying to write a personal view hook and a social view hook. Now, guys, this is just practice, okay? So I do not expect anybody to be perfect at this. But again, you will see that these 2 particular ideas I would like for you to try. Now, you can go back and watch the video again. I also have a sample essay, which we'll take a look here in just a moment. And then the second part of the homework assignment is practicing writing a thesis for this particular essay. Now, again, I've given you some directions as to what the thesis needs to include, and I've given you some ideas of how to start the thesis. So again, what I'm really interested in here for next week is just, do we understand how to do those 2 things? So that's one of the activities. That's the only activity, rather, that's listed here in the classroom. And then the other document is what's called a sample essay. And this particular essay here, this particular essay is written by Kathy Livingston. It's just a sample essay. And I'm going to be referring to this essay, especially next week. But here in the sample essay, there are 5 paragraphs, and I've numbered each one. So for example, paragraph 1 is talking about the introduction. So what I did here is I put number 1 here. This is the introduction here. So for example, the hook is highlighted in yellow, and the thesis is in the bold statement. So if you notice, the hook and the thesis are basically the entire introductory paragraph. So for example, I'll read the hook here and the introduction. This one is about cats. So if you have any cat lovers here in the class, you'll probably agree with this essay. But notice the person starts with an expression. So the person says, "A dog is a man's best friend." That common saying may contain some truth, but dogs are not the only animal friend whose companionship people enjoy. For many people, a cat is their best friend. So notice this person used a hook of a couple of sentences, but now I'm kind of interested, because the truth is I believe that dogs are the better pet. But you see, now I want to know more. I want to know more about this particular person's opinion. Now look at their thesis. Their thesis says, despite what dog lovers may believe, cats make excellent house pets, as they are good companions, they are civilized members of the household, and they're easy to care for. So notice in this thesis, they gave us 3 ideas that they're going to explain in the rest of the essay. Now again, in our particular topic, again, our topic is thinking about the advantages of having friends and the who are similar, and the advantages of having friends who are different from us. So the truth is, this is almost the thesis right here, because that's what we're doing. We're comparing these two things. The only part of the thesis that's really going to be your kind of special addition is, what kind of friend do you prefer for yourself? Now, my final recommendation for the thesis is that it does not have to be very specific. You don't have to say, for example, in this essay, I'm going to compare these two, and then I'm going to prefer this kind of friend. Instead, you can make the thesis, again, a little more general. You could say that you're comparing the advantages of both, and you will explain which kind of friend you like. So again, in this case, the thesis can be a little more general. It doesn't have to tell us every detail that you're going to explain. So again, you can look at the sample essay to give you some ideas as to how to structure the introduction. Again, you can go back and watch our little presentation here today to think about what other ways I could structure the hook. What personal experience could I use? What social particular idea could I use? And really, guys, I just want you to think of this as an exercise. The truth is, after you do this exercise, once we actually get to writing the essay, you may completely ignore or forget about this. But this is more of just an opportunity for me to see how everybody's doing so far on this particular idea. So that's kind of the idea I want you to think about for next time. Okay, so once again, I have created a new section of our Google Classroom called TOEFL Essay Writing Workshop. And what I will do is, when we're finished here, and probably tomorrow morning, I will post this particular presentation and this information you see on the screen here. Okay. All right. Well, guys, my part of our presentation is finished. We've got just a couple of minutes here, so I'm going to